In North Africa, Rommel had pushed British forces back to El Alamein, just 60 miles from Alexandria and the Suez Canal. If he broke through, he could threaten the entire Middle East and its vital oil fields. But Rommel had a problem. His supply lines stretched back hundreds of miles to Tripoli, and the British were sinking his supply ships in the Mediterranean. The British got a new commander, General Bernard Montgomery, methodical, cautious, and determined to fight only when he had overwhelming superiority. Throughout the summer of 1942, Montgomery built up his forces. By October, he had more men, more tanks, more guns, and more supplies than Rommel could ever hope for. On October 23, 1942, the Second Battle of El Alamein began with a massive artillery barrage. For 12 days, Montgomery's forces ground down Rommel's army in brutal attritional warfare. Rommel, low on fuel, ammunition, and reinforcements, fought skillfully but couldn't overcome the odds. On November 4th, he began retreating. He would never stop retreating. Churchill later wrote, "Before Alamein, we never had a victory. After Alamein, we never had a defeat." It was an exaggeration, but it captured the psychological importance of finally defeating the legendary Rommel. And El Alamein wasn't even the end. On November 8, 1942, American and British forces launched Operation Torch, landings in Morocco and Algeria. This was America's first major offensive operation against Germany. Under the command of General Dwight D. Eisenhower, American and British forces secured North Africa's Atlantic and Mediterranean coasts. Now, Rommel and the Axis forces in North Africa were caught in a vice. Montgomery advancing from the east, Allied forces from Operation Torch pushing from the west. Through the winter of 1942-43, the Axis armies retreated into Tunisia. Hitler kept sending reinforcements, trying to hold North Africa, but it was hopeless. On May 13, 1943, the last Axis forces in North Africa surrendered. Over 250,000 German and Italian soldiers were captured. The Mediterranean was now an Allied lake. The Allies had a springboard for invading southern Europe, and the troops had gained invaluable combat experience. But while El Alamein was important and Midway was crucial, the battle that truly broke the back of the German military was happening in Russia, at a city on the Volga River that bore Stalin's name, Stalingrad. In the summer of 1942, Hitler launched a new offensive in southern Russia, aiming for the oil fields of the Caucasus. But he also became obsessed with capturing Stalingrad, partly because of its industrial importance, partly because it bore Stalin's name and taking it would be a propaganda coup. In August, German forces reached the city. What followed was perhaps the most brutal battle in human history. Stalingrad stretched along the western bank of the Volga River for over 30 miles. It was an industrial city with factories, apartment blocks, and over 500,000 civilians. The Germans attacked with over 600,000 troops, thousands of artillery pieces, tanks, and aircraft. The Luftwaffe bombed the city into rubble, killing 40,000 civilians in the first week alone. But the Soviets refused to give up the city. General Vasily Chukhov's 62nd Army defended every street, every building, every room. The battle became intimate and vicious. Soldiers fought room to room with rifles, bayonets, entrenching tools, knives. The average life expectancy of a newly arrived Soviet soldier was 24 hours. Snipers became legends on both sides. Soviet sniper Vasily Zaitsev killed over 200 Germans and became the subject of a famous duel with a German sniper that may or may not have actually happened, but captured the personal nature of the battle. German forces slowly ground forward, taking 90% of the city, but they couldn't take it all. Soviet defenders clung to narrow strips of land along the Volga River, supplied by boats crossing the river under fire. Every factory became a fortress: the grain elevator, the Barakadi factory, the tractor factory, the Red October factory. These places, unknown before the war, became immortal. The fighting was unlike anything seen before or since. In some places, Germans controlled one floor of a building while Soviets held the floor above or below. Artillery and aircraft bombed already destroyed ruins into even smaller rubble. The city was described as looking like a moonscape or like the surface of another planet. But while the Germans focused on the city, the Soviets were planning something bigger. General Georgy Zhukov, who had orchestrated the defense of Moscow, was planning a massive counteroffensive. He observed that the German flanks north and south of Stalingrad were held by weaker Romanian, Hungarian, and Italian armies. These were the weak points. On November 19, 1942, the Soviets launched Operation Uranus. Huge armored forces smashed through the Romanian lines north and south of Stalingrad. Within 4 days, the Soviet pincers had met, encircling the entire German Sixth Army, over 250,000 men inside Stalingrad and the surrounding area. Hitler forbade any attempt to break out. He ordered the Sixth Army to hold their position and promised that the Luftwaffe would supply them by air. Hermann Göring assured Hitler it could be done. It was a catastrophic miscalculation. The Luftwaffe could never deliver enough supplies. The encircled Germans needed a minimum of 700 tons of supplies per day. The Luftwaffe never delivered more than 120 tons in a single day. Meanwhile, Soviet anti-aircraft guns shot down transport planes by the dozens. Through December 1942 and January 1943, the trapped German soldiers starved and froze. They ate their horses. They burned furniture and books for warmth. Frostbite and disease killed thousands. German forces made attempts to break through the encirclement from the outside, but failed. On January 31, 1943, Field Marshal Paulus, commander of the Sixth Army, surrendered, the first German field marshal ever to surrender. Over the next 2 days, the remaining German forces in Stalingrad surrendered. Over 250,000 German and Italian soldiers were captured. 91,000 survived to surrender. Most were already sick, wounded, or frostbitten. Of those 91,000, only about 6,000 would survive Soviet captivity and return to Germany years later. Stalingrad was the turning point on the Eastern Front. Germany had lost an entire army and countless irreplaceable veterans. From this point on, the Soviets would push westward relentlessly, always westward, towards Germany, towards Berlin. Hitler, refusing to accept defeat, tried one more major offensive in the east. In July 1943, German forces attacked a Soviet salient around the city of Kursk. Operation Citadel was meant to encircle and destroy Soviet forces there and regain the initiative. The Battle of Kursk became the largest tank battle in history. Over 6,000 tanks, 2 million men, and 4,000 aircraft were involved. But the Soviets knew it was coming. Their intelligence network and spies had warned them. They prepared massive defensive fortifications, layered defenses in depth, minefields, anti-tank positions, artillery. The Germans attacked with their newest weapons, Tiger and Panther tanks, Ferdinand tank destroyers, elite SS panzer divisions. But the Soviet defenses absorbed the attacks. German tanks became bogged down in minefields and were destroyed by concealed anti-tank guns. The Soviets counterattacked with fresh reserves. After 2 weeks of brutal fighting, the Germans had advanced barely 10 miles in some places and were exhausted. Hitler called off the offensive. Germany had lost 200,000 men, 1,500 tanks, and 1,000 aircraft. They would never again launch a major offensive in the east. From Kursk onwards, the Soviets attacked continuously. They liberated Ukraine. They pushed into Belarus. They advanced into Poland. City after city was recaptured. The German retreat became a rout. By early 1945, Soviet forces would be in Germany itself. But while the Soviets were bleeding Germany white in the east, the Americans and British were preparing to open a second front in the west. In July 1943, Allied forces invaded Sicily in Operation Husky. In 5 weeks, they conquered the island. This triggered a political crisis in Italy. Mussolini was overthrown and arrested. The new Italian government began secret negotiations with the Allies. On September 3, 1943, British forces crossed from Sicily to mainland Italy. 5 days later, Italy surrendered. Hitler had seen this coming and had moved German forces into Italy. When Italy surrendered, German troops seized control. They rescued Mussolini and set him up as a puppet ruler in northern Italy. What followed was a bitter 2-year campaign up the Italian peninsula. The Italian campaign became a brutal slog through difficult terrain against determined German resistance. Mountains, rivers, fortified positions, every advantage favored the defenders. The fighting at Monte Cassino, at Anzio, along the Gothic line, these battles cost tens of thousands of Allied lives for modest territorial gains. Italy was important, but it wasn't the main event. Stalin had been demanding a second front in France for years. The British and Americans had been promising it, but needed time to build up forces and perfect the complex operation of amphibious invasion. By early 1944, everything was ready. Operation Overlord, the invasion of Normandy, was set for early June. The supreme commander was General Dwight D. Eisenhower. Under him were the best Allied generals, Montgomery, Bradley, Patton. They had assembled the largest amphibious invasion force in history. In southern England, over 150,000 troops from America, Britain, Canada, and other Allied nations trained and waited. Thousands of ships and landing craft were gathered. Thousands of aircraft prepared to support the invasion. An elaborate deception operation convinced the Germans the invasion would come at Pas de Calais, the narrowest part of the English Channel, not Normandy. The invasion was planned for June 5th, but weather was terrible. Eisenhower postponed it 1 day. On the evening of June 5th, he had to make the decision: go on June 6th with marginal weather, or wait 2 weeks for the next suitable tides. He chose to go. Just after midnight on June 6, 1944, paratroopers from American and British airborne divisions dropped behind the invasion beaches to secure key positions. At dawn, the naval bombardment began. Then, at 6:30 a.m., the first waves of troops hit the beaches. D-Day had begun. 5 beaches were designated for landing: Utah and Omaha for American forces, Gold, Juno, and Sword for British and Canadian forces. At Utah, Sword, Gold, and Juno, the landings went reasonably well, though fighting was intense. But at Omaha Beach, everything went wrong. The Americans landing at Omaha faced the 352nd Infantry Division, veterans positioned in strong defensive positions on the bluffs overlooking the beach. The preliminary bombing and naval bombardment had missed most German positions. The terrain heavily favored the defenders. As landing craft dropped their ramps, German machine guns and artillery opened fire. Men were cut down in the water, on the beach, at the seawall. Bodies piled up. Some units lost 90% casualties in the first minutes. For hours, the situation was in doubt.
At one point, the invasion commander considered abandoning Omaha Beach. But small groups of men, led by sergeants and lieutenants, found ways up the bluffs. Slowly, through individual initiative and desperate courage, American forces gained footholds. By the end of the day, they held Omaha Beach, though at terrible cost. By nightfall on June 6, 1944, 156,000 Allied troops were ashore in Normandy. They had breached Hitler's Atlantic Wall. The cost was about 10,000 casualties, including 4,400 dead. It was a high price, but it had worked. The Germans were caught in a strategic nightmare. They had strong forces in Normandy, but Hitler and his generals believed this was a diversion and kept forces at Pas-de-Calais waiting for the real invasion. By the time they realized Normandy was the main attack, it was too late. Through June and July, Allied forces fought through the Norman hedgerows, small fields separated by thick earthen banks and hedges that created perfect defensive terrain. Progress was slow and costly, but American ingenuity found a solution. Tankers welded improvised cutting blades to the front of tanks, allowing them to burst through hedgerows and break the stalemate. In late July, American forces broke out at St. Lo. General Patton's Third Army raced through the gap, swinging around to encircle German forces. In the Falaise pocket, tens of thousands of German troops were surrounded and destroyed. By late August, the Allies had liberated Paris. On August 25, 1944, French and American forces entered Paris. General Charles de Gaulle, leader of Free France, marched down the Champs-Élysées to the acclaim of millions. France was free. But the war was far from over. The Allies pushed toward Germany from the west. The Soviets pushed from the east. And in the Pacific, American forces were advancing island by island toward Japan. In October 1944, American forces invaded the Philippines, fulfilling General Douglas MacArthur's promise, "I shall return." The Battle of Leyte Gulf became the largest naval battle in history. Japan committed its remaining naval forces in a desperate attempt to stop the invasion. In a series of engagements spread over hundreds of miles, the Imperial Japanese Navy was effectively destroyed. Japan was now completely cut off from its southern conquests. But Japan's military leadership refused to consider surrender. Instead, they intensified their most desperate tactic, kamikaze attacks. Pilots loaded their planes with explosives and deliberately crashed into American ships. It was effective. Kamikaze attacks sank dozens of ships and damaged hundreds more, but it was also unsustainable and accomplished nothing except killing Japanese pilots. Meanwhile, American B-29 bombers, flying from bases in the Mariana Islands, began systematic bombing of Japan. The firebombing raids were devastating. Japanese cities, built largely of wood and paper, burned easily. The firebombing of Tokyo on March 9-10, 1945, killed over 100,000 people and destroyed 16 square miles of the city. It was the single most destructive bombing raid of the war. In Europe, the Allies believed victory was close. In September 1944, they launched Operation Martin Garden, an ambitious plan to seize bridges in the Netherlands and cross the Rhine River into Germany before Christmas. Airborne troops would seize the bridges, while ground forces raced up a single road to relieve them. It was a disaster. The plan was too complex, intelligence was ignored, and German resistance was stronger than expected. British paratroopers landed at Arnhem and held the bridge there for 9 days before being overwhelmed. Of the 10,000 British troops that landed, only 2,000 escaped. The Allies hadn't crossed the Rhine. The war would continue into 1945. Then, in mid-December, the Germans launched a surprise counteroffensive in the Ardennes forest of Belgium, the Battle of the Bulge. Hitler had scraped together his last reserves and attacked through the same region where he'd achieved victory in 1940. He hoped to split the Allied armies, recapture Antwerp, and force a negotiated peace. The Germans achieved complete surprise. In heavy fog that grounded Allied aircraft, German panzer divisions punched through American lines, creating a bulge in the Allied front. The inexperienced American 106th Infantry Division was surrounded and forced to surrender, the largest American surrender since Bataan. But the Americans held at critical points. At St. Vith, at Bastogne, small forces held against massive German attacks, disrupting the German timetable. When German officers at Bastogne demanded surrender, American General Anthony McAuliffe replied with one word: nuts. The weather cleared after a week, allowing Allied aircraft to attack German forces. Patton's Third Army wheeled north and relieved Bastogne. By January 1945, the German offensive had been stopped and reversed. Germany had expended its last reserves and achieved nothing. The road to Germany was open.
By early 1945, Germany was being crushed from both sides. In the east, Soviet forces had swept through Poland and were approaching Germany's eastern border. In the west, American, British, and Canadian forces were approaching the Rhine River. But Germany wasn't the only Axis power facing defeat. In the Pacific, American forces were closing on Japan itself. In February 1945, Marines landed on Iwo Jima, a volcanic island 8 square miles in size, barely 750 miles from Tokyo. The Japanese had fortified Iwo Jima with a network of tunnels, bunkers, and gun positions. 21,000 Japanese defenders were determined to make the Americans pay for every inch. The Marines who landed faced some of the most intense fighting of the war. The battle lasted 36 days. The famous photograph of Marines raising the flag on Mount Suribachi came on the 5th day of the battle, but fighting continued for another month. When it finally ended, virtually all Japanese defenders were dead. American casualties were over 26,000, including nearly 7,000 killed, the only Pacific battle where American casualties exceeded Japanese casualties. But Iwo Jima served its purpose. It provided an emergency landing field for B-29 bombers returning from raids on Japan. Over 2,400 B-29s made emergency landings there, saving an estimated 27,000 American airmen. Even bloodier was Okinawa, invaded in April 1945. Just 350 miles from Japan, Okinawa was Japanese home territory with a civilian population. The fighting lasted 82 days and was hellish. Japanese forces used kamikaze attacks extensively. Over 1,900 kamikaze missions were flown, sinking 36 American ships and damaging 368 more. When Okinawa finally fell in June, over 12,000 Americans were dead, 38,000 wounded. Japanese casualties included over 100,000 military dead and perhaps 150,000 civilians killed, many of them committing suicide rather than surrender, driven by Japanese propaganda that Americans would torture and kill them. The battles of Iwo Jima and Okinawa gave American military planners a terrible vision of what invading Japan itself would cost. If these small islands cost so many casualties, what would the invasion of Japan's home islands cost? Estimates ran into the hundreds of thousands or even millions of casualties on both sides. But events in Europe would provide an alternative to invasion. In March 1945, American forces crossed the Rhine River. British and Canadian forces crossed in the north. Soviet forces launched their final offensive toward Berlin. Germany was being torn apart. In April, Soviet forces surrounded Berlin. Over 2.5 million Soviet troops with 6,250 tanks and 7,500 aircraft converged on the capital city, defended by perhaps 1 million Germans, many of them old men and Hitler Youth teenagers. The Battle of Berlin was apocalyptic. The Soviets bombarded the city with thousands of artillery pieces. Soviet and German forces fought street by street, building by building. Civilians cowered in basements as the city was destroyed around them. Hitler had retreated to his bunker beneath the Reich Chancellery. As Soviet forces closed in, his mental state deteriorated. He issued impossible orders to armies that no longer existed. He blamed everyone, his generals, the German people, everyone except himself.
On April 30th, 1945, with Soviet soldiers literally hundreds of meters from his bunker, Adolf Hitler and his wife Eva Braun, whom he'd married the day before, committed suicide. Hitler shot himself while Eva took cyanide. Their bodies were carried outside, doused with gasoline, and burned in a shell crater. The man who had promised a 1,000-year Reich had lasted 12 years. His empire was in ruins, his capital was being conquered, tens of millions were dead because of his actions. On May 2nd, the remaining defenders of Berlin surrendered. On May 7th, in Reims, France, Germany signed an unconditional surrender to the Western Allies. On May 8th, in Berlin, they signed another instrument of surrender to the Soviet Union. May 8th became VE Day, Victory in Europe Day. The war in Europe was over. Cities across America and Britain erupted in celebration. People danced in the streets. After nearly 6 years of war, Europe was finally at peace. But the war wasn't over. Japan still fought on. Through the summer of 1945, American bombers continued pounding Japanese cities. The firebombing had destroyed over 60 cities and killed hundreds of thousands of civilians. American submarines had strangled Japan's maritime trade. The island nation was being starved. The American military was planning Operation Downfall, the invasion of Japan. It would be the largest amphibious operation in history, dwarfing D-Day. The invasion of Kyushu was planned for November 1945, with the invasion of Honshu following in March 1946. Casualty estimates were terrifying. Based on the battles of Iwo Jima and Okinawa, American planners estimated hundreds of thousands of American casualties and millions of Japanese military and civilian deaths. The Japanese military was preparing the entire population to resist, arming them with bamboo spears and training them for suicide attacks. It would have been a bloodbath beyond imagining. But there was an alternative, though a terrible one. In the New Mexico desert in July 1945, American scientists detonated the world's first atomic bomb, the Manhattan Project, a secret program that had cost $2 billion and employed over 100,000 people, had succeeded in creating a weapon of unprecedented destructive power. President Truman, who had become president when Roosevelt died in April 1945, faced an agonizing decision: use the atomic bomb to force Japan's surrender and avoid the casualties of invasion, or refuse to use such a devastating weapon and accept the casualties that invasion would bring. Truman chose to use the bomb. On August 6th, a B-29 bomber named Enola Gay dropped an atomic bomb on the city of Hiroshima. The bomb exploded with the force of 15,000 tons of TNT. The center of the city was instantly vaporized. The heat flash burned people into shadows on walls. The blast and firestorm that followed killed over 70,000 people instantly. Tens of thousands more would die from radiation sickness and injuries in the following weeks and months. Japan's military leaders, even after Hiroshima, refused to surrender. They believed Americans only had one bomb, and that they could still make invasions so costly that America would negotiate peace. They were wrong. On August 9th, a second atomic bomb was dropped on Nagasaki, killing another 40,000 people instantly. That same day, the Soviet Union declared war on Japan and invaded Manchuria with 1.5 million troops, crushing the Japanese Kwantung Army in a matter of days. Emperor Hirohito, who had remained largely silent throughout the war, now intervened. In an unprecedented radio broadcast on August 15th, the first time most Japanese had ever heard their emperor's voice, he announced Japan's surrender, citing a new and most cruel bomb and saying that to continue the war would lead to the total extinction of human civilization. On September 2nd, 1945, aboard the battleship USS Missouri in Tokyo Bay, Japanese representatives signed the Instrument of Surrender. World War II was over.
Let's talk about what World War II cost. The numbers are so large they become almost incomprehensible, but we need to understand them. Between 70 and 85 million people died in World War II, roughly 3% of the world's 1940 population. This includes about 25 million military deaths and 55 million civilian deaths. But even these numbers don't tell the whole story. The Soviet Union suffered approximately 27 million deaths. That's more than all other Allied nations combined. Poland lost about 6 million people, roughly 17% of its population. Germany lost between 7 and 8 million. Japan lost about 3 million. China's losses are estimated between 15 and 20 million, but the chaos of the war makes precise counting impossible. The Holocaust alone killed 6 million Jews, 2/3 of European Jewry. Roma, disabled people, homosexuals, political dissidents, prisoners of war, millions more murdered in concentration camps and by Einsatzgruppen. The destruction of infrastructure was staggering. Entire cities were obliterated. Dresden, Hamburg, Tokyo, Hiroshima, Nagasaki. These cities were essentially erased. Warsaw was 85% destroyed. Manila, Rotterdam, Stalingrad, the list goes on and on. The economic cost is estimated at over $4 trillion in 1940s money, well over 50 trillion in today's dollars. But how do you measure the cost of lost generations, destroyed cultures, displaced populations, psychological trauma that echoed through families for generations? World War II changed everything about our world. The United Nations was created in 1945 to prevent another such war. The Nuremberg and Tokyo war crimes trials established principles of international justice that are still referenced today. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights emerged from the ashes of the Holocaust. The phrase, "never again," became a solemn promise. Geopolitically, the old order was shattered. The British and French empires, bankrupted by the war, began rapid decolonization. Within 20 years, dozens of new nations would emerge in Asia and Africa. The United States and Soviet Union emerged as superpowers, beginning the Cold War that would define global politics for the next 45 years. Technologically, World War II drove innovation at unprecedented speeds. Radar, jet engines, rockets, computers, nuclear power, all were developed or advanced because of the war. The V-2 rocket developed by Germany led directly to the space race. The electronic computers built to break codes led to the digital age. Penicillin mass production saved millions of lives during and after the war. But perhaps the most important legacy is the lesson of vigilance. World War II showed what happens when evil is appeased, when aggression goes unchallenged, when hatred is allowed to become state policy. The Nazi regime's industrial murder of millions demonstrated depths of human evil that still shock us. The atomic bombs demonstrated humanity's capacity to destroy itself. We study World War II not out of morbid fascination, but because its lessons remain urgently relevant. It teaches us that democracy is fragile and must be defended, that hatred left unchecked leads to genocide, that freedom isn't free, it was purchased with the lives of millions who fought against tyranny. Think about that for a moment. 75 million people died. That's roughly the current population of Germany, or Thailand, or the United Kingdom. An entire nation's worth of people wiped out in 6 years. Among those dead were scientists who would have cured diseases, artists who would have created masterpieces, parents who would have raised children, children who would have changed the world in ways we'll never know. The loss is incalculable. But there's also something else, something important to remember. World War II also showed humanity's capacity for courage, sacrifice, and resilience. The British people who endured the Blitz, the Soviet citizens who held Leningrad through 872 days of siege. The resistance fighters in occupied countries who risked their lives to save others. The soldiers who stormed beaches knowing many wouldn't survive. The ordinary people who hid Jews, saved refugees, and did what they could against overwhelming evil.
Oskar Schindler, a German industrialist who saved over 1,000 Jews. Raoul Wallenberg, a Swedish diplomat who rescued tens of thousands of Hungarian Jews. The soldiers who liberated concentration camps and wept at what they found. The airmen who flew mission after mission knowing the odds. The medics who saved lives under fire. The codebreakers at Bletchley Park who shortened the war by years. The women who worked in factories, flew aircraft, served as nurses, and kept their nations running while men fought. World War II revealed the worst of humanity, but it also revealed the best. It showed that when faced with existential evil, ordinary people are capable of extraordinary heroism. Today, the last veterans of World War II are in their late 90s and older. Soon there will be none left who remember firsthand the horror and heroism of those years. That makes it even more important that we remember, that we study, that we understand what happened and why. Because the fundamental causes of World War II, nationalism, economic desperation, scapegoating of minorities, authoritarian leadership, the failure of democracies to stand against aggression, these haven't disappeared from the world. They exist today in different forms. The details may change, but the patterns remain. That's why we study history, not to glorify war, but to prevent it, not to celebrate violence, but to understand what leads to it and how to stop it. World War II was the deadliest conflict in human history. It killed more people, destroyed more cities, and caused more suffering than any other event in recorded history. The atomic bombs that ended it opened a new era where humanity possesses the power to destroy civilization itself. But out of that terrible war also came the determination to build a better world. The United Nations, imperfect as it is, has helped prevent another global war for 8 decades. The principles of human rights are now enshrined in international law. Democratic governance spread to nations that had never known it. Former enemies, Germany and France, Japan and America, became close allies. The generation that fought World War II, often called the greatest generation, came home and built the modern world. They created the prosperity of the post-war decades. They put men on the moon. They built the institutions that have preserved peace among major powers for 80 years. As we conclude this journey through World War II, remember this. Those 75 million people who died weren't just statistics. Each was someone's child, someone's parent, someone's friend. Each had dreams and fears, hopes and loves. Each life was precious. Each death was a tragedy. We honor them not by glorifying the war they died in, but by working to ensure it never happens again, by standing against hatred, by defending democracy, by remembering that freedom and peace are not natural states. They must be constantly protected and nurtured. World War II showed us the worst of what humans can do to each other. But it also showed us the best, the courage, sacrifice, and determination of millions who fought against evil and won. That's the legacy we must carry forward. The war that began in September 1939 and ended in August 1945 changed our world forever. 6 years that transformed everything. From the ashes of that conflict emerged our modern world with all its promise and peril. The story of World War II is ultimately a story about us, about what we're capable of, both terrible and magnificent. It's a reminder that the choices we make matter, that standing against evil requires courage, and that freedom is never truly won. It must be defended by each generation. Thank you for taking this journey through the entire history of World War II. Remember those who fought. Remember those who died. Remember those who survived. And most importantly, remember the lessons, because the price of forgetting is far too high.